The day Margaret handed Daniel the keys to that abandoned house, she wasn't being generous. She was watching to see if he would flinch, watching to see if his eyes would light up the wrong way, the way men's eyes do when they smell money instead of love, watching to see if the man she had quietly, carefully, almost against her own will started to fall for was real. She had been burned before, badly, not once, twice. The first man loved what she was building, loved standing next to someone going somewhere. The moment the firm hit its stride, she discovered he had never been interested in her at all. The second was more dangerous because he was kind. He listened, he showed up, he said all the right things. Then, 3 years in, when Margaret finally showed him the real version of herself, the grief, the fear, the 2 a.m. version that wasn't performing anything for anyone, he grew quiet, then distant, then gone. After that, Margaret made a decision. Quiet, firm, the kind you make alone at 2 in the morning when the house is too still. The next man who came into her life would have to prove himself, not with words, not with flowers, not with candlelit dinners that cost more than her first car. He would have to prove himself in the silence, in the hard places, in the moments, when nobody was watching and nothing was easy and there was absolutely nothing in it for him. So she took him to the most broken place she knew. And what Daniel did inside that house, it didn't just surprise her, it undid her. Now, before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand who these two people were, because this story only makes sense when you know what each of them had been carrying for years. Margaret was not a cruel woman. She was a careful one. There's a difference only people who have truly been hurt understand. Cruel people enjoy the pain they cause. Careful people are just trying to make sure they don't drown again. And Daniel was the kind of man this world doesn't make enough of anymore. But you'll see that for yourself. Stay with me. Because what he does in this story is the kind of thing that reminds you why love, even later in life, even after all the heartbreak and the closed doors and the long quiet nights, is still worth every single risk. Daniel Mercer was 54 years old and he had the hands to prove it. Calloused, scarred across the knuckles from years of construction work. The kind of hands that have fixed things, built things, carried things, and held a 7-year-old girl named Lily through the worst night of both their lives. 3 years earlier, his wife Sarah had walked into what the doctor called a routine surgery. Daniel had driven her there himself that Tuesday morning, kissed her in the parking lot, told her he'd be back at 2. He was back at 2. Everything in that waiting room was exactly the same, except Sarah was not there, and a doctor was standing in a doorway with the kind of expression that means the words coming next are going to permanently change someone's life. Then there was the drive to pick up Lily, and Lily's small face, confused, then frightened, asking where Mommy was. And Daniel, sitting on the kitchen floor that night with every light in the house on, thinking, how does a person do this? He figured it out the only way people ever do, one day at a time. He drove 40 minutes each way to a job site every morning before the sun came up. He came home, made dinner, helped with homework, read until Lily fell asleep, and then sat in the quiet of his small rented house with the particular loneliness only single parents know. Not the loud kind, the kind that just sits there, in the empty chair across the table, in the silence after the bedroom light goes off. He wasn't looking for anyone. He told himself he wasn't built for it anymore. Margaret Hale had more rooms in her house than she had reasons to go home to. At 61, she had built a successful interior design firm from scratch, raised 2 sons now living across the country with families of their own, and survived a marriage that had looked perfect from the outside and felt like slow suffocation from the inside. The divorce had been clean, no screaming, no scandal. Just 2 people who had grown so far apart that one morning over coffee they both, quietly, simultaneously understood. This is done. The civility of it somehow made it lonelier. Since then, Margaret had filled her life with work, travel, carefully curated dinner parties where she laughed at the right moments and never let anyone stay too long. She was not unhappy exactly. She was managed. Safe in the way that empty rooms are safe. Nothing could hurt her there, but nothing could reach her either. She had decided that safe was enough. Until the afternoon she walked into a hardware store in a light rain, dropped an entire bag of supplies across the floor of aisle 7, and a man with calloused hands got down on one knee without being asked and helped her pick every single thing up. He didn't make a big deal of it. That was the thing that stayed with her. He didn't look up expecting a thank you. Didn't make a joke, just helped. Gathered everything carefully, placed it back in the bag, stood up, handed it to her with a small nod, and went back to reading the label on a can of wood stain. Margaret said thank you. He said, of course. 2 words. Like it was the most natural thing in the world to be decent. She thought about those 2 words for 3 days. They ran into each other again at the same store 2 weeks later, then at the diner on 5th, then at Lily's school. Daniel's daughter and Margaret's neighbor's granddaughter were in the same class. The world, it seemed, had an opinion about these 2 people. Slowly, carefully, the way 2 people do when they've both been through the fire and don't entirely trust warmth anymore. They began to talk, then to meet for coffee, then to look forward to the coffee in a way that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. But not everyone was happy about it. Margaret's closest friend, Carol, pulled her aside one evening. "Maggie," she said with the gentleness of someone about to say something sharp, "you don't really know this man. You know how he acts when he wants to impress you. That's not the same thing." Margaret laughed it off, but the words stayed. And without fully realizing it, she started to wonder, who is Daniel Mercer when nobody is watching? She was about to find out. The house on Elm Creek Road had been sitting empty for 11 years. From the outside, it looked like something grief had built and then abandoned. The front porch sagged on one side. The paint, once a warm cream color, Margaret remembered, had peeled back in long strips, like skin after a sunburn. The yard had gone wild, weeds shoulder high along the fence line. An oak tree had dropped a heavy branch across the walkway, and nobody had moved it. Nobody had been here to move it. This house had belonged to Margaret's parents. She had grown up inside these walls, learned to ride a bike in that driveway, sat on that porch every summer evening until she left for college and the world opened up and swallowed her whole. Both her parents were gone now, her father first, then her mother 18 months later, as if she simply couldn't manage the distance. And every time Margaret thought about selling, which she had thought about many times, practically, sensibly, something in her chest said, not yet. So it sat, waiting for something she couldn't name. She didn't tell Daniel where they were going that Saturday morning, just said, "Come with me." He brought coffee. He always brought coffee. When they pulled up and she cut the engine, she watched him from the corner of her eye. This was the moment. Carol's question made physical. Who are you when nobody is watching? A certain kind of man would have seen square footage, resale value, would have started calculating before he even opened the car door. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "This place has good bones. Not, what's it worth? Not a single word about money or potential. Good bones. Like the house was a person worth believing in." Margaret felt something shift in her chest, but she kept her face still. The test wasn't over. They walked the property. She told him about her parents. Small things at first. Her father, who never called a repairman if he could fix it himself. Her mother's tomatoes along the south fence every summer, same variety year after year, the smell of them warming in the afternoon sun. Daniel listened, really listened. The kind of listening that has weight to it, that makes you feel for the first time in a long time, like what you're saying actually matters. When they reached the front porch, He tested the sagging boards with his foot. Crouched and looked under the support beams, ran his hand along the railing, looked at the broken window, a jagged split across the lower pane, probably from a storm. Said nothing, then walked back to his truck. Margaret's heart dropped. This is it, she thought. He has seen enough. The broken porch, the rotted wood, 11 years of neglect, and he is leaving. He is kind enough not to say so. He will just go. Carol's voice was suddenly very loud. You don't really know this man. Margaret felt the old familiar cold settle into her chest. That particular brace she'd perfected over the years. The way you tighten before the wave hits. She was already telling herself, it's fine. You knew this was too much. You knew. He came, back with a toolbox, worn, heavy, dark, with years of real use. He set it down on the porch, looked at her and said, You mind if I take a look at that window? You don't have to do that, she said. I know, he said. And he was already opening the box. She sat on the porch steps and watched him work. No performance, no jokes about what a big job it was, no hints about compensation, just quiet, methodical work, the kind that comes from a man who knows what he's doing and has nothing to prove. At one point, Lily called. He answered softly, told her he'd be home for dinner, said, I love you, Bug, and went right back to work without missing a beat. For the first time in a very long time, Margaret felt something she'd almost forgotten. The name of. Safe. Not managed. Not controlled. Not performing. Just safe. But she didn't know yet, not even close, what Daniel had quietly decided to do. And when she found out, that's when everything changed. They had seen each other twice. Once for coffee that stretched past 2 hours without either noticing, once at a school event. Both times something between them had shifted. Softer, warmer, more certain. But neither said anything about it directly. That was their way. Careful, unhurried. Like people who'd learned the hard way that the best things don't need to be rushed. Margaret had not been back to Elm Creek Road. She told herself work had been busy. The truth she'd been carefully not looking at was this. Something had happened on those porch steps, something she had no name for, and going back meant facing it. It was Lily who gave it away. She was 7, the world's worst keeper of secrets, not because she's dishonest, but because she is so genuinely excited about good things that the words fall right out of her before she can stop them. Margaret stopped by Daniel's house one evening to drop off a book. Lily opened the door before she could even knock, had clearly been watching from the window, and grabbed Margaret's hand with both of hers, eyes wide. Miss Margaret, did you see it yet? Did you see it? Daniel appeared behind her in the hallway, slightly caught, slightly embarrassed, entirely genuine. Lily, he said quietly. Sorry, Daddy, she whispered, but she was still smiling. She couldn't help it. Margaret drove to Elm Creek Road alone the next morning. She almost didn't recognize it. The branch across the walkway, gone. Not pushed aside. Gone, the concrete swept clean. The weeds along the fence cleared, all the way down to bare soil. The porch, the sagging, exhausted, broken-down porch she'd avoided looking at for 11 years, re-leveled and reinforced. New boards where old ones had rotted, stained to match, fitted with care that told you the person who did this took their time. Cared. The broken window was not patched. It had been replaced, clean glass catching the morning light, throwing a pale rectangle across the porch floor. Margaret stopped walking, stood there with her hand over her mouth. Then she turned to the south fence, every post repaired. The entire fence line tightened and squared, and along its base, the weeds cleared, the soil turned dark and loose and ready, just like her mother used to keep it. Margaret had never told Daniel about the tomatoes. She had mentioned the fence once, one sentence 3 weeks ago, on a porch step while he wasn't even looking at her. He had been listening that carefully. He had held onto a small grief she'd let slip without meaning to, carried it here, and done something with it. Without. Bing asked, without any audience at all. She sat down on the repaired porch steps, solid now, not a single creak, and she cried. Not the composed kind Margaret Hale had perfected over 61 years of being strong in public. The other kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and old, that has been waiting a very long time for permission. She cried for her parents. For the years this house sat broken while she convinced herself she was too busy to grieve it properly. For the marriage that slowly taught her that being truly known by another person was a luxury she no longer qualified for. For every wall she'd built since, brick by careful brick, that kept the wrong people out, yes, but also kept the right ones out too. Daniel arrived an hour later. He had known she would come. He sat down beside her on the steps and didn't say anything for a while, just handed her a coffee. He always brought coffee. Finally, she looked at him. Why? He was quiet, the honest kind. My wife used to say that love isn't what you feel, it's what you show up to do. He looked at the fence line, the cleared soil, the repaired posts. Lily helped me out here last Sunday. I wanted her to know. When someone's broken places matter to you, you don't just acknowledge them, you roll up your sleeves. You never asked me, Margaret said. You never asked if I wanted this. No, he said. I didn't ask, because I wasn't doing it for you to owe me anything. I was doing it because it needed doing, and because you matter. Carol's question, who is he when nobody is watching? Now Margaret had her answer. He was exactly the same man. Every time. Watched or unwatched, thanked or unthanked, with an audience of one 7-year-old or an audience of none. He was just Daniel and Margaret, who had spent 6 careful years building walls to keep the wrong people out, finally understood she had been keeping the right ones out too. The test was over. And the answer didn't feel like relief. It felt like a door she had bolted from the inside for very good reasons, slowly swinging open. That house on Elm Creek Road? Margaret never sold it. She planted tomatoes along the south fence that spring. The same variety her mother used to grow. The name found in an old gardening journal she hadn't opened since the funeral. Lily helped. Press the seeds into the soil with the seriousness children bring to things they know matter. Daniel finished the repairs over the following months, slowly, on Saturdays, without shortcuts. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, steady work, Margaret stopped calling it her parents' house. It became something else, something she had no word for yet. But it felt, for the first time in years, like a beginning. I want to speak to you directly for a moment, honestly, without performance. If you are over 50, if you have lived long enough to know what it really costs to love someone who wasn't, careful with that love. If you have sat in a house that used to be full and is now very quiet, wondering whether that quiet is peace or just a different kind of loneliness. If your kids are grown and far away and you are proud of them and you miss them at the same time. If you went through a marriage that ended, not badly, not dramatically, just over, and woke up on the other side not entirely sure who you are without it. If you have built walls, if you've been hurt carefully enough and repeatedly enough that the walls stopped being a choice and became a reflex, then you already know what this story is really about. It is not about a house. It is about the courage it takes to let someone see your broken places, not the composed version of you, the actual you, the grief you haven't finished with, the rooms you haven't been able to walk back into, and the extraordinary rarity, at any age but especially at this one, of finding someone who looks at all of that and doesn't flinch, who reaches for a toolbox. Real love, the kind built for real weather, doesn't always arrive with music. Sometimes it arrives on a Saturday morning with worn hands and 2 cups of coffee, and it simply gets to work. Before you go, I genuinely want to know, have you ever tested someone you cared about, or been tested yourself? Did they show up? Did you? Leave your answer in the comments right now. You will be surprised how many people here have lived a version of this story. And there is something that matters more than I can fully explain about reading a stranger's words and thinking, I am not the only one. If this story reached something in you today, hit the like button right now. 1 second. It tells me these stories matter. That is all I need to keep making them. If you are new here, every week we tell stories like this one. Real human moments. Love that shows up quietly. People who choose decency when nobody is watching. If you want more of that in your life, subscribe right now and turn on the bell. The next story is already waiting. Think of one person who needs to hear this today. Just one. Someone who has given up on love a little. Someone tired of being careful and still getting hurt. Share this with them. That is your only assignment, because here is the last thing, the truest thing. Margaret tested Daniel because she was afraid. That was the whole truth, not strategy, not wisdom, fear. The very human fear of someone who has been hurt enough times that the wounds have names. And Daniel passed. Not because he was trying to, not because he knew he was being watched. He passed because he had never been performing. In the first place, he was living a quiet code. When someone's broken places matter to you, you show up. You bring the coffee, you fix the fence. The world is full of people like that. Still out there, still showing up, still reaching for the toolbox. Don't let your fear build walls so high you can no longer see them coming.